Okay, much better. Hey, Pacific, how's it going? Let's, forgot to test all of my little buttons to make sure they were still working. So there's that one. It's working. I should really have checked the daily diatom because it's the one that usually fails. Hey, it's real. It's Boreozonicola. Is that weird? Really weird diatom. And we're looking at some samples from Beauty Lake. So, project that I started like 2008, 2007. Back in the ancient times. Way before I had a job or an SEM. And I've been mostly exploring it for, I'm looking for specific things. One is this Patella, which is, I guess it's actually Patella ficus. And just trying to get pictures for Diatoms of North America's website. There are some other really cool diatoms in there, though, and I think this is one of them. It's just a fragment of it. This is Hygroptera, another really rare diatom. It looks like it could be a Pinularia, but it has a raphe. So it's a very strange genus. So we're looking for Patella, which isn't on Diatoms of North America, so that we can add it. But Hygroptera, I think, is on there. Ugh, misspelled it. Let's see if I can figure out what it should be spelled as. Hygroptera. Sorry, that's why it's just misspelled. Hygroptera, like a rock. Hygroptera. There it is. Hey Samsung, how's it going? Spelling strikes again. Yeah. Waterstone. Good name for a diatom. Not hydro, but hygro. So, I don't know what the prefix hygro stands for, but it's a really weird diatom. They probably have SEMs of it on there because I don't think you can usually identify it very easily without an SEM. Although I identified it in the sample correctly, so maybe that's not totally true. I don't know if I spelled it correctly, but I did notice that it had a raphe, so. But probably if you really wanted to show that, you probably need the SEMs. I guess I should get a picture for my own sake, because I do teach a class on diatom taxonomy occasionally, and they probably would appreciate some pictures that were collected on our actual SEM from our actual samples. One of which they might get assigned. You never know. What is this little guy? This one does not have a raphe. I don't recognize the species, but it's a Pseudostarosira, I think. Or no, it's a Starosira. Yeah. Little tiny Starosira, some type. Here's a really cool Discostella. This is Stelligera. It's a pretty clean view, but it's like hiding in the shadow of this. It looks like it'll work. So, these diatoms have concentric undulation, and so, because they form back to back inside the valve, some of the valves have like innies and some of them have outies, so they can fit together when they make the new valve inside. And this one's an innie, basically. So rather than having a hump that goes upward like a hat, it has an indentation where the hat would fit against it, which is kind of interesting, because the morphology of them kind of sometimes makes them difficult to identify correctly. And same thing happens with Stephanodiscus and many of the Lindavias, but this is a Discostella, and I think it's Stelligera, but this is a nice clean one. A lot of them have been kind of dissolved in these samples, so I'm going to try to get a nice clean image of it. And we're at beam intensity 10, so none of that's ever going to be possible at that beam intensity. Just getting it in focus, and now I'm going to just back out a little bit, center it, get the composition the way I want, which is to say put it mostly in the middle with a lot of area around the outside edge. Like so. A little bit more centered. Slow the beam down. It's looking good. It looks like a wheel, like a bicycle wheel or something, a motorcycle wheel. And I'll fix the brightness and contrast. Word forming element meaning wet, moist, moisture. Hygros. Wet. Okay. Wet stones. That's probably where they're found. It's probably the reason that they have that name. This looks like it'll work. A little bit of problem today with the SEM drifting, which usually happens. An anonymous cheered 1 bit. Just 1 penny of their money. Thank you for the bit, anonymous cheerer. This computer volume's all the way down. Yeah. Pacific also with a cheer of 1 bit. I'm going to be rich. Rich, I tell you. So this will be a nice clean view. I like how you can see that the outside end of these, like the striae, doubly punctate, and towards the middle they kind of become a slot-like structure, and I think we'll be able to tell for sure what this is as a result of the visibility here of the structure, which usually for the Discostellas, the little ones, they have some different patterns with respect to how the areolae structure are in the striae. So it's probably Stelligera, but yeah, nice and clean, right? No clay. So that's working out pretty well. And people seem to like the round diatoms. I don't know why. But it seems like when I post pictures of round diatoms, I usually get a lot more like excited responses than when I post the non-round ones. Something about round diatoms appeals to people. Probably it reminds them of pizza. That's my working hypothesis. Some sort of affinity for pizza draws them in. So also, you use words like margarita. Well, I mean, I suppose that helps. Occasionally I use words like margarita. You know, it's what the kids want to hear, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, salty would be good. I should put some of those San Francisco Bay samples back on here one of these days. We've been mostly looking around at freshwater species for kind of a long time now. And there's, you know, that rumor that you're going to come visit the lab again, so maybe we should just wait until then. I was thinking, I saw people sometimes do, like, spend enough points in the channel and you get a community sort of activity, community recommended activity, that I might. Discostella stelliger. Oops, no, we don't want to do that. Maybe I'll put some things up for doing some special streams that we could consider doing. Because it's starting to get a little warmer here. Today's an exception, it's back to being cold, but I think starting next week we'll probably be kind of leaning towards spring and a little less leaning towards winter. Sometime tomorrow it's supposed to snow. I don't know that I'll have any time to do anything with it. But it would be nice to get maybe one more snowflake macro photography stream in, so we'll see. Ooh, what was that diatom up there? Right here. Oh, it's some sort of Ensynopsis. Okay. A lot of the diatoms in these samples are similar to the one that I've been looking for in shape, like the outline. Once you get close, it's clearly not that. So, all right, your innie outie will be fun. Yeah, you have to be a taxi. Okay, we'll see you. Thanks for hanging out for as long as you could, and drive safely. Don't get shot or whatever happens out there in San Francisco when you drive around in your car. Oh, look at this little guy. It's a cutie. I need to, you can see there's the little bit of problem I have with the drift. Like the image is just moving a little tiny bit. I need one that doesn't have clay particles in the middle of it, and then I would have taken that picture. But that one has like a big plate of clay sitting right in the center of it, obstructing my view of what that little thing could be. This is a coccinese, just the aeraphid valve of a coccinese. You can see that the valve has had some of this material's been stripped off of it right here around the margins. But it's a very long, skinny coccinese with some very intricate changes in the areolae. So I should try to find out what that one is. Picture would probably help, but again, that one has some junk on it, and I just get really picky when I can be picky, I guess. I guess I hope it can be picky, maybe I'll find another one that's nice and clean either, but we'll give it a shot. How are you doing today, Sam? Are you working? Are you supposed to be working? And you're not? Look at this little thing with the raphy. It's 3 microns long. How am I supposed to identify that with a light microscope? 3 microns long. That's not a respectable size, even for a diatom. Here's these little weird goat head looking Chrysophyte Cysts that I took a picture of previously. There's a Chrysophytes. There's another Chrysophyte. They're all over the place in here, but those ones are kind of interesting because they have these like long spine projections coming off of them. These ones you can tell are Chrysophytes because they have just a little opening. Here it is. Ah, you can actually see it does have 4 spines coming off of it in a tetrahedron shape, which is sort of what I expected. So, you're clearly working and you're in your jammies. Oh, all right. What is the visually stunning point regime? Oh, doesn't it tell you? It's like you can request a super high resolution version of any image, either one that I could collect right now or one that I've already got in my archive. And so if you spend those points, basically, I will send you a link to the digital image. It will be too big to actually like email it to you. So I will just put a link up on my cloud server and send it to you that way. That could be any of the diatom images, and then if you wanted to use it as a backdrop, a desktop, something, you could reduce the quality of it and put it however you like. If you want to print it as a puzzle or print it as a wall art, it will actually be like massive. The file sizes that I can get for images that I've colorized, you know, something like 100, more than 100 megabytes. So it will be a huge image. Or if you don't want it to be that big, I can make it smaller for you. But ideally, then you could use it if you wanted to print it out as wall art, or you wanted to make it, you know, print it out as a puzzle, put it on a t-shirt, whatever you want to do with it. It's your art, basically. You can think of it like one of those stupid NFTs, but you don't have to pay anything for it, and you know, we're not going to trade it on the stock market or anything. Just having some nice high quality image, and having, you know, not have to screenshot and then have a crappy screenshot version of it. Or even the ones that I post in the channel aren't, you know, they're at best they're like 5 megabyte images or something, and maybe less than that because Discord won't let me make it any bigger. But if you wanted like a really high quality image that you could zoom in on and it still looks good and it doesn't pixelate, I can make that happen. So you can just tell me which one you want if you use it. Yeah, better than poster quality even. You could do whatever you wanted to with it. I can't really print it and send it to you, although I do have access to a poster printer. But I can give you the file, so if you wanted to print it out or whatever, however you want to deal with it. Yours to play with at high quality, basically. And it doesn't have to be SEM images. It can also be any image that I have from photography, the moon, you know, Orion Nebula, anything. You just let me know. If you just like want a giant butterfly photo, I've got a gazillion butterflies from macro photography that look amazing, and I can just put one of those out. Those would be easy because those ones actually start off coming out of my camera at like 40 megabytes or something. They're huge images because they're I can drop them out in the raw from the camera directly, and then I can gigify them up to any size, basically. That will allow us to make them bigger without causing any loss in quality. So it's nice, or potentially nice. There's that cockanice, but we only got half of it. There's another one. These chrysophytes are also been all over in here, and they're kind of interesting. They got little like pimples all over them, little dimply dots. There's a bunch of weird chrysophytes in here. One day I'm going to get good at chrysophytes. We'll see. And and then we'll just include them in my analyses. I'll just go ahead and identify them all while I'm doing the diatom work. That's covered with junk. Here's a Nitzia. Here's what I'm actually looking for. This is Pulchella. Krigeriana is the species, and it has these weird little holes, but this one is like covered with junk and also broken, so not ideal. So we'll just keep looking, keep scrolling around. This is Lindavia, no, that's the Discostella still. Stelligera or whatever. I'm in a cruddy, clay-rich part of the stub. I like to try to find these little areas where there isn't much clay. And some diatoms have settled in there. They probably don't have a bunch of junk on top of them. So I'm going to try to zoom out a little and find one of those. I have like 3 stubs that have the same material on them for this stream. And these are stubs that I made. Not that there was anything wrong with the ones that Mallory did, but I wanted to have a little bit more material, so I put them on some bigger stubs that we have, and I also made a bunch of one sample that I knew had a bunch of the Pulchella, or Pulchella if you like, on it, from when I was looking through stuff in the light microscope trying to take pictures the day before. So I decided, I'll just go ahead and make some more. And that's what these are. So you guys have never seen these stubs before, but you may have seen samples that are similar from like last week when we did this. So it's a totally different sample and a totally different stub from each of those from that sample. But a lot of the species are the same from one lake sample to the next. It's just a matter of like who's the dominant diatom, and each one probably changes considerably. This is a Lindavia here. This is Rossii / Tripartita. I have to put a slash between them because they find that the forms kind of grade into each other, and morphologically they're difficult to separate. So what's this little guy? Oh, it's a nice clean version of a Starcirella. Starcirella have little bars that go over the openings like these. So we're just going to rotate that. And we'll try to get a nice picture of it. Rotate it somewhere out of our field of view. I don't feel like I rotated it that far. Oh, there's another one. It's it's up here. It's this is Pseudostarcira pseudoconstruens, I think, and this is Starcirella. All these little tiny fragilarioids have like a really similar prefix in their name, and the genus names are Staro something, or Pseudostaro something, or Star something or other, which I kind of wish we wouldn't do as scientists. It's a like these things are closely related, so we're going to name them kind of similar sort of approach, which makes sense. But I feel like it just adds to the confusion for people who are trying to talk about them or identify them, because they're constantly stumbling over like, which one of these words is it the right one? Okay, so focus first. I think what I'm going to try to do is zoom in on this junk right here and focus on it. And the reason for that is junk usually has well-defined edges. With beam intensity 10, nothing has good edges, but I can change the beam intensity and you can see that there's actually like a really sharp line around this piece of junk now. And that tells me that that whole surface is in focus. So it comes out to be a little bit sharper focus. And I have to make the beam intensity smaller because this is a very small diatom, and the beam intensity creates an issue if it's if we zoom in, basically. So it's also not perfectly at 45 degrees, but it's so close. I think I'm just going to leave it because I don't want to have to redo the composition again. Good enough. And when I slow the beam down, you can see that it's clearly still in good focus, and I'll just snap that image. It'll take us 3 minutes for it to collect it, but let's see. Any ideas for having an attack of diatoms point redemption? What would it do? Plays a tune similar to Flight of the Bumblebees. Oh. Saturates the screams. Oh, I can do that. That's easy, actually. Just have them fly in all over the place. Or like emotes of diatoms all over the screen. Is that what you want? Or do you want it like when there's a raid and there's like an explosion of diatom emotes? Or you just describe it. I can make it happen. You know, all that stuff is really easy to do. If I can make a water bear with hearts that pop in and out of the screen, I think I can manage diatoms pretty easily. An attack of diatoms would just be fitting for the channel. Oh yeah, that's probably a good idea. You know, here I thought you were opposed to having all these crazy modifications to the activities you could do from the channel points. And here you are suggesting something even more distracting than, you know, the little ball spinning in a circle or whatever, you know. Oh, it can be exclusive-ish. Oh. What sort of exclusion should I make it? Like lots of points? I feel like if it's an event, it's not going to be... It shouldn't be worth a lot of points, but... I change the points all the time because I feel like I see what other people do for their channel points, and I think, wow, that's like... You're not getting a lot for the value out of that point total. But maybe if I also had it play like a little song, you know? Whenever somebody new joins... Oh, like it plays the little attack of the diatoms whenever they join? Actually, I can make events that happen on somebody. Do you mean like following? Somebody follows? Or what do you mean by joins? Joins the actual channel? I don't know if I have a sensor that can detect when somebody joins the channel. Let me see. Triggers are chat, subscription, redeems, gift subs, raids, host bits, new follower, whisper, prediction, pull, moderation, hype train. So just like joining the channel probably would be really chaotic, but can't be done, doesn't seem. Somebody that follows, when they follows, that can happen. That's easy. So new follower, yeah, okay. So that's easy to do. New follower, super easy. I was thinking about just making my own. You know, I've got the little things that pop up. Actually, I should check to make sure those are on. Yeah, the little alerts that pop up, but I can make my own alerts actually now. Well, maybe they'll be just as nice, or maybe they'd be better. I don't know. To play with them a bit. Alright, this is a Starocyrella. Internal view, without any junk on it, which is nice. Starocyrella. SP, I don't know. Internal. Not totally sure what the species is. It's very linear. lanceolate shape. Very like almost naviculoid shape, but it's very tiny as well. So, all right, speed to 4, beam intensity to 10, and we'll go look at this pseudoconstruans, which is what I think this is. So normal construans don't have these like gaps between the areolae on them. They have like a different shape, but this is the outline that they would have. So I think it's a pseudoconstruans. It was kind of cool. I'm pretty sure you can identify that pretty easily in the light microscope, so I probably already had that correctly identified in my samples. It would be nice to have had this when I was actually doing the counts. So I could have just been like, I don't know what this little thing is. This is that weird little Chrysophyte cyst. Sorry, I just wanted to fix it so I could see what it looked like. It's like a super little spiky ball. Very interesting exterior ornamentation on the Chrysophyte cyst here. Again, I probably could identify it. I was getting ready to post that other one the other day, and I was like, oh, I was going to identify it first. I would try to figure out what number they put on it. This one I also probably have looked at before and probably could identify it. It's pretty specific, and I've got a book with a lot of the details. I don't know that they have SEMs of everything, but having an SEM only makes things a little bit easier when you're trying to identify objects. So this is Diatoma, I think, or it could be Tetracyclus. Because there is Tetracyclus in the lake. Navicula is a Chrysophyte cyst. This is a Discostella. We've been looking at the Discostella earlier. Here's another one. There's also a bunch of Oligosyra kind of laying around in the field of view. Here's one. Encynema. I think this is a Rimiportula. This is probably that Cockanies. Here's an Oligosyra. There's a Discostella. Let's see, if I zoom out just a little, it's the surface of an Oligosyra. All these little circles are Oligosyras. Those are the internal views and the external views, but you can't see the actual little ring. So that's an internal, that's an external. What's this? Interesting little guy. Oh, it's just a Navicula. Less interesting than I thought. I think that's a Nitsia. And I think there's another Nitsia I saw over here somewhere. It's pretty clean. There's one. Here's one. They're all over. There's a Acanthidium. It's probably Minutissimum. It's an Encynema. There's a huge little spiky sponge spicule. That guy right here is a sponge spicule. It's like a toothpick with spines. Not a diatom. And here's one of those Cockneys, and you can see this valve has a raphe, and this one doesn't. It has a gap where the raphe would go. That's dissolved a little bit, but that's actually just the sternum and the rapheless valve. And you can see this one underneath is a little bit different. It has a different pattern to the striae and everything, but it's actually the same diatom, just the other valve. Monoraphids, that's the way they are. They're a challenge. Okay, I am going to try to find us something here to take a picture of. So I can come back to chat and see what's going on, if anything. I'm struggling a little today, trying to get everything done, so I scrambled all morning working on a manuscript that is looking at a publication from the diatom record from Jackson Lake and in Wyoming, near the Tetons, within Tetons Park, near Jackson Hole. And so I worked on that for most of the morning, sent it off to the principal author, lead author, with my comments. And when I hit the send button in my email, another email immediately showed up that was like, hey, you have another manuscript you need to like get done by tomorrow. And I was like, oh no. So I may stop a little early so I can get home and start working on that one before tomorrow. And then I have 2 more manuscripts that I still haven't gotten to that have just been sitting in my mailbox, staring at me angrily every time I open my mail. So, always a challenge trying to keep up with everything in the middle of this semester while I'm teaching. And I've got 4 classes this semester, which also doesn't help. So, Chippy Flip, hello, and Michael Learning, hello. And Kalathon used the daily diatom to see what our daily diatom was while I wasn't looking. Hopefully it was something good. We'll give a shout out to Chippy Flip. Boop. And yeah, I know. Boreonicola is how you say it. It's pretty unpronounceable. We never see that one. I never see that diatom. So, I mean, the genus or the species. So, and also Michael Learning, thank you for dropping by, both of you. Do you know, that's a good question. I have the diatom webpage open. I'm just gonna grab it and see what it says about the ecology of that species. Really, the daily diatom should come with a direct link to this as well. That's a great idea. And I think the one we were looking at is Hustettii. It's named after very famous diatomist Hustet, who described almost like, I don't know, every diatom, if you look at the author, has Hustet in it, basically. It's been around, well, he was around forever, but he was one of the first diatomists, so had an advantage. Boreonicola Hustettii was found in Lower Lost Lake in Deer Lodge County, Montana, at an elevation of almost 3,000 meters above sea level. pH of Lower Lost Lake is basically neutral, and the specific conductance, which is how much salt's in the water, basically is 14 microsiemens per centimeter, which is very low. So basically just pure water. It says that it is particularly frequent in Arctic, should be a capital A, Arctic, but Arctic, Alpine, and boreal regions of northern Europe, Asia, and North America, such as Alaska, Adak Island, Siberian Islands. So I don't work in any of those areas. I wrote a grant once to try to do some work in the Arctic, but it didn't get funded. And we submitted it like 3 times, I think, and it never got funded. So, I mean, 3 different cycles. Maybe it was just 2. And then I just decided, I don't know, these Arctic people, they don't want me, futzing around in their sediments, apparently. And then I saw somebody else got funded maybe 2 or 3 years later with basically not the same idea, but looking at diatoms from lakes in those same areas. So maybe I was just in somebody's backyard and they didn't want me in their area. This is, I think that's a monoraphid. I think that is Rossophidium, but I'm not positive. Rossophidium, SP, maybe, external. And that's because I don't know what these little tiny things are a lot of times. But I think it's a Rossophidium. It's straight, and if we saw the other valve, it probably would look different and doesn't have any striae, any raphy on it. So I think it's probably monoraphid diatom. That's my guess. But since how we can only see half of it, I'm not positive. It'd be better if I saw it from the girdle view or like a 3/4 view, so you could actually see what was going on the other side. But my guess is the other side looks something like this, which is I think this is a Rossophidium or close to it. This is what I thought the other side probably would look like. So. Chrysophyte Cyst, Chrysophyte Cyst. Is that same thing we were just looking at? Oh, no, this is something different, actually. This is actually a little Slophora. I don't think that other one was a Slophora. This is doubly punctate. I'm pretty sure that other one just had a single row of punctate. I'm going to double check. Yeah. So, I suppose it could be a little tiny Slophora, too. It's an option. If the other valve has striae, which I can't tell. Hey, this is a cool diatom. It's wavy. It's Robusta, Pseudostarocera robusta, I believe. That's the name of that one. Or maybe it's Binotus. Well, I think it's Robusta. Those little Fragularia, I almost always have to look them up. I'm just not as good with them as I am with some of the other diatoms, but I know which pages to look, I know right where to flip to, because I'm always looking them up anyway. So. It's a big fragment of a Slophora. This is a Encynema. A very pointy one. It's probably Encynema gracilis or something like that. Where are you? Oh, here's this Cockanice. And that looks like it's a Lindavia. Did you skip a stream this weekend, Michael Learning? Do you normally stream on the weekends? And I didn't see you this weekend. So, maybe I missed it because I was gone all day Saturday. Maybe that's what happened. If it was on Saturday, I might have missed it. We were at a rock and mineral festival with my daughter. So, didn't get to see anything on Saturday until the evening, basically. Look at this short little diatom. It's like a total little oval. Cockneys. Are you sure? Another weird one. It's a big flat area in the center with nothing in it. I need to go back to this lake, and next time I get to the Rocky Mountains, and just collect a whole bunch of modern samples so I can get some good pictures of some of these diatoms. A lot of the stuff that's in here has got either some junk on it or it's dissolved, but they're abundant enough, that I should be able to find some of the things that that we see in the history of the lake system. Hopefully they're still around today, and it would be super cool to go out and collect some modern diatoms. I don't know why, when we were collecting stuff from here originally, I didn't think about just running around and collecting a bunch of random samples from macrophytes and surfaces. Normally it's on my agenda, but we didn't for this one. Probably because I had to hike in carrying all this coring equipment, and then hike out carrying the coring equipment plus the cores, and I was probably not thinking about anything else other than, I've got to make this hike with like a bunch of weight, probably 70 pounds on my back, so never cool. I think the boat was actually brought in by a student, but kind of got to be a bit of a horse to carry like coring equipment and cores and boats and stuff into lakes to take cores, especially if you have to hike a long way. I don't think it was that far. I think it was like maybe 4 or 5 miles, but it's still a lot when you're lugging around 70 extra pounds with you. So anyway, I was probably fixated on that. It was a while ago though, like over a decade, so I probably forgot how traumatic it was for me. I think the day after we cored this lake, I just took a bunch of Tylenol and stayed in bed most of the day because I was so tired and dehydrated. Just drank a bunch of water and hang out. Try not to exercise too much because I was so sore. We had a bunch of days when we were out in the field for these collecting stuff when it was 98, 99 degrees Fahrenheit for us while we were coring. It's just totally not a pleasant experience when you're hiking, although a lot of it was forested, so we were at least in the shade. I have no idea where I am on the sample anymore. I'm just roaming around, hoping to find a clear area with a bunch of cool diatoms in it. Could happen. Definitely seems like they thinned out right here a little bit. I don't know if there's any cool ones around, but what I'd like is the one that I'm trying to find to be isolated and not covered with clay and just like, not with a bunch of stuff over top of it or underneath it. That's an avicula. Sometimes it's just too much to ask for. Although, I'd be surprised how many times I'm just rolling around in here and then suddenly there's like a clear spot with a perfect diatom in it. Just hoping one of these times it's the diatom I'm looking for that's in one of those. I could probably also remake these stubs with a little bit more focus on getting rid of the clays, and I might do that. Because this one still has a bunch of clay in it, and because the samples had dried out in the containers that we had, the clay parts were sort of in little crunchy biscuits, basically, at the bottom of the jar, And when Mallory made it, she just left them like that. But I thought, oh, there's a bunch of diatoms in there. We should try to get that out. And I used the sonicator, which basically shakes the sample, basically using sound, and vibrates it. And it broke all those little clay clumps up. And then I made my stubs, but it looks like maybe they also redistributed a bunch of the clay into the actual sample. So I need to do that, then rinse out the clay, probably for next time. I don't know if I'll stream it. If I do, it'll probably be this weekend. And then we have kind of a busy week next week, so I don't know if I'll stream from the SEM, but the following week for me, not next week, but the one after, is our spring break. So I'm hoping that I can spend a few extra days basically in here in the lab, trying to get some of the things completed, and I might stream extra heavy on those days. So we'll see. It's a possibility. I'm getting messages that I should probably read. I'm like way out on the edge of this stub. And there's the edge right there. And I keep sort of dancing back a little bit from the edge. And then looking up at that thing and going, why am I not at the edge yet? I keep just kind of moving around close to it, but without actually getting to it. This is... yes. Digitalis. That's what this diatom is. It is not what I thought it was. That is Digitalis. It used to be Navicula. It got moved into its own little group. Gincalia, I think. Digitalis is the name of that. It's a super weird genus, relatively new. And I think that's what that is. I need to look at it closely and then look at the description for that genus, but I think that's what we were looking at. I was expecting to see some of those, I just didn't know what they would look like. This is a Hygroptera here. Hygroptera. There we go. So it looks like a little tiny Fragillaria, if you're familiar with what those look like. It looks like maybe it could be puncticulata, but it has a raphe, which means it cannot be. And I really want one that's not all beaten up like that one is. That's basically that view, though. Alright. You know, it's been a while since I've been back to the chat, and I don't think I can even hear the alerts. So, hopefully nothing exciting hasn't happened, and I'm just sitting here talking nonsense while something exciting is happening. I don't know. I don't know what exciting could happen, to be honest, but it could be. Could be something exciting. Ooh. It's the little Celophora. Doubly punctate Celophora. It's so little. Okay, zoom out a little bit. And good enough. Beam intensity is changed. We'll collect an image. You can see what's going on. If nothing, I can check my phone. 4 classes is a pretty good workload. Yeah, it's too much. But there are a bunch of little classes. Power was out for 2 days and then your computer died. Oh, that's terrible. I got it. I think I got it. I think it's Gencalia, Anna. And hello, Studio Cornix and Devil and Mrs. J. Studio Cornix. You should give her a follow. And Mrs. J. You should give her a follow as well. You're just dropping in for a bit. Well, it's nice to see you. Hopefully things are going well. Are you at work? Are you supposed to be at work? Aren't you like a working person now? Oh, you just finished up. Okay. Well, this one is a Celophora. And Anna loves it when I just say everything's a Celophora, but that actually is a Celophora. So you'll just have to deal with it, Anna. You're half-time for now. Oh, okay. They're just easing you into it, back into the workforce. Sort of kicking and screaming. Best if they don't just throw you all the way in. I made a comment earlier that my wife saw, which was I was in line for lunch and there was a kid in front of me who had a backpack that said Space Jam, and I was like, college student, like an adult college student with a backpack that said Space Jam, and I was like, isn't this a movie from the 80s or the 90s? Like, why is there a college student with a backpack? Is this like a family heirloom that they handed down from the late 80s or whatever? And she sent me a message to let me know that they have remade the movie. Yeah, there's a new Space Jam, and I didn't know. And then she laughed. I don't know if she was laughing because I didn't know that. She should know me well enough to know that there's no way I would know that. Or if she just thought it was funny that I pointed it out, because I was like, Space Jam? Anyway, I did think it was funny, and I was like, what are kids doing these days that they got like a Space Jam backpack? Like a college student. I'm an out-of-touch old person, so just give me some slack. And I also don't watch movies, so... I definitely don't watch Space Jam. It's the surface of an Oligocyra. All the little spines around the outside are here, and the areolae are starting to dissolve, such that they look like little hole protectors. It's a acanthidium. There's the raphe valve, and there's the araphid valve. But they're friends. They're right here next to each other. Both valves. This one I don't know what that is. Oh, it's Hygroptera again. That's the external view of the Hygroptera. Yeah. Definitely. This is that pseudoconstruens. Stelligera. This is like a dissolved diatom, but it has a really cool look to it. Like, a really weird, heavy outline around the diatom holes. I think you're just seeing the internal structure of it a little bit. Somewhere in some of these samples, if we zoom out, one of the things that you'll see, which I have been working around, but we haven't actually pointed them out, or rather I haven't pointed them out to you, is these things. This giant structure that you're seeing right here is volcanic ash. This is, I think, Mount Mazama Ash. That is the way that volcanic ash looks when you look at it in a light microscope, or an SEM rather. This is the pyroclastic, like fine pyroclastic debris, basically. So it gets ejected out into the top of the volcano. It's very fine particulate matter. It's either been ripped up from the sidewalls of the volcano, or it's cools in the actual air. And these little lines that you can see are holes, and these little streaks that you can see are actually like, as it cools in these little sort of tubes sometimes, and then these are just the like fractured version of those things. We've looked at some volcanic ash before in the SEM. I just didn't bother to point it out because it's all over the place in these samples. Here's some with a little, this is an Oligosyra over here on the side. And there's one of those Hygropteras, or Hygropteras. But this is volcanic ash right here. You can see the surface has got some clays on it, and that's a little Chrysophyte Cyst. Just fell on it on the way in, probably. But the surface of this is actually kind of cool in here. Let's take a look at it. There's a little diatom fragment on the outside of it. Yeah, it's got sort of like a wavy surface. You can see that here. These sort of like undulated, they look like little waves, like surface waves, like ripples across the surface. I'm not sure, those might be like cooling structures, you know, as it actually cools, because they look like they're polygonal. So things tend to shrink a little bit when they cool, and they usually create these sort of mud crack-like structures, so that might be what that is. But that's a little diatom fragment that landed on top of it. It's from the lake, not from the volcano. And this mud that's around it's probably from the lake, not the volcano. But this is a volcanic fragment right here, for sure. Very cool. Maybe I should get some pictures of the volcanic fragments. And I can share them with Volcano Doc, our friend of the channel. Set it to slow, set this to high, and we'll take a picture. does look like honeycomb for that very reason. Yeah. Space Jam is a mood. Hey, Broken Symmetry, how's it going? Oh, is it with LeBron? Oh, I see. We're going to replace whoever did the first one. Was it Michael Jordan? So he wants to basically replace him in everything. The 90s are back. The original Space Jam site's still around. That was the first movie website. Oh, really? I didn't know that. The youth of today, yeah. I say that having never seen either version all the way through. I haven't actually seen any of them. I don't watch that kind of movie, but that's why I don't even know when it was. What I never understood about the whole concept is how one is meant to jam space. Well, that's a good question. Those marks are on agates too, yeah. Little bubbles and pockets. Yeah, there's the air bubbles get stretched out when it gets pulled through the lava, and so they create these little vesicles, little tube-shaped vesicles. Those are pretty cool. And then the surface does sort of have like a honeycomb appearance to it, yeah. So, space toast. If you could get some of that honey butter and have honey butter toast, no, space honey butter, that would be good. Yeah, instead of jam. I mean, I like jam, but you can only eat so much jam. It says I have an upcoming calendar event in 15 minutes. Oh. Yeah, not going to that. Space honey is your jam. Exactly. We'll get some space bees. You like the golden frame? Or you just like to change things? Which is it? I got that new shake it up command too. You can just click it and it will shake me and change the colors. And then it ends up randomly. One thing that's cool about the shake-up version is you can get purple, which isn't a color that you can get with the other choices. There is a purple bubble version. It's just not one you can get. You can only get it by using the shake-up command, I guess. It's exclusive, so just putting that out there. Pink, how's it going? I've never seen the movie Space Jam. However, I was aware the website still exists because I got commented on when I put my website up from 1996. All right. Good to know. I just plugged information into the audio jack. Oh, did I? Sound's still working. Maybe I bumped something. It keeps trying to open up my stuff. I'm older than you. I'm pretty sure, Studio. So, alright. This is Beauty Lake, but this is the Mazama Ash. Mazama. The Mazama Ash is ash that erupted from Mount Mazama, which became Crater Lake. So the top of there used to be a mountain, and it exploded, and it delivered ash all across the western part of the U.S. And we now refer to that basin as the Crater Lake Basin, and it's a very famous, it's like a national monument or a national park. And this is ash from that eruption, which is, I think the radiocarbon date is 6,570 years ago or something like that. It's roughly 7,000 years ago in real numbers and non-radiocarbon numbers. So it's a good way for me to easily figure out how old my sample is, because these diatoms were, they had ash buried with them. So plus or minus, 60 years or something from the Mazama eruption is when this sample would have been around. So we can tell that very easily. just by knowing that it was co-deposited with those ash particles. So some of the ash can get remobilized, but this core was collected from a deeper part of the lake basin, and you wouldn't expect that to happen for very long. So it just get deposited, and then you wouldn't expect to see. So this sample, if I zoom out, which I will do, this is a Gumphonema of some kind, you can see ash particles all over the stage. So here's one, but all of these bigger chunks are actually pieces of ash. And so you wouldn't expect that to happen if it were something that was occurring not basically when the eruption happened, unless there was some sort of downslope movement event that caused it to happen at the same time. That's a big old Pinularia. Ooh, look at this Chrysophyte Cyst. It's so spiky, and it has little spikes that stick out and bigger spikes that stick out. You really don't want you to eat it. They don't want something little to eat it, I guess. There's a sponge spickle that's spiny as well right there. Thought I saw something good. Is this good? Oh, there's another big thing right there. Hard to tell if it's going to be covered in junk or not. It's a Gumphonema. If we zoom in, we can see that the pores, the openings, the areolae are these little C shapes. Do you see? C, C, C. Those are, and then this is a stigma. Those are characteristic of Gumphonema. So I don't even need to see that it's asymmetric, but I will tell you that it's also asymmetric. So it's got a skinny end and a little bit shorter end on this side. So like this is the midpoint. This is the foot pole, the long skinny end, and this is the head pole. And if we were to look at the top of this diatom, where the foot pole is currently, if it wasn't covered with junk, we'd actually see, yeah, there's these little holes right here that are different. They're little round holes. Those are actually the apical pore field. It doesn't have one of those on the other end at all, which is why we refer to it as the foot pole. It's the part that the stalk that these diatoms live on grows from, or is extruded from the cell. Is a more accurate way of saying that. Let's zoom in and see what this guy is. It's that weird little cockneys again. I'm going to stop and take a picture of this one, just because I don't know that I'll find anything better than this, and I really am curious what this is. It's still a little bit of junk on it, but, you know, you get the picture. You know what it more or less looks like. Go with that. Figure that guy out. Head-mounted dingus. How much intent do diatoms have? 0. Well, not 0. When they move, is it in response to stimuli or just randomly? They've been shown to be what's called phototactic. Phototaxis is when an organism can detect light. And so they will move towards light. They may also move in response to drying, like or any kind of condition that's potentially not something that they want to be around. Like if there's a higher nutrient gradient and they can detect it, they'll move towards the nutrient gradient. So for diatoms, we know for sure that they're phototactic. We know that they respond to light. The other things, it's a question mark, exactly what the driving force is. But Studio says, one of my first jobs was with my local ISP, and I totally made a website in the mid-90s. Awesome. You had a GeoCities page. I remember GeoCities. Yeah, GeoCities sites. Please sign my guest book. My web counters don't work anymore. Uh-oh. You still have your under construction GIF on there. Excellent. Well, hopefully that answered your question, head-mounted dingus, but feel free to ask any other questions. They're not usually moving randomly. Or they may be moving around a surface like in a slide randomly, but they do also respond to things. But they don't have eyes, and they don't have any like true sensory organs. So, because they're single-celled organisms. Yeah. So, whenever I have them under a slide, they're urgently going nowhere. Yeah, they can respond to the microscope's light. In fact, they'll start to, like, if you keep them in a refrigerator for, like, a dark refrigerator for, like, I don't know, like 2 weeks, and they mostly seem like they're dying or they're not, they're in a dormant state, and then you put them in the light microscope, the light will activate them, and also a little bit of the heat, and they'll start very sluggishly at first, and then if you come back in, like, I don't know, a half hour leaving them in the light, they'll have started to move around kind of a lot more. Benthic diatoms also get some nutrients from the landscape that they're in. So, like, diatoms that live on a specific type of rock may move from one part of the rock to another part of the rock to get to nutrients, or to get to better light conditions. So they can respond to those things. They do have some agency. I don't know why they might just move around randomly, but they do. On some level, they are moving. Some of them are just moving around randomly. I don't know necessarily what their intention is, but there's an advantage to moving if you're an organism that lives in a fixed environment, which is, if you just sit in place and you collect all the nutrients around you, like phosphorus, nitrogen, whatever, that you need to grow, it actually creates a concentration gradient, right? You're just pulling it from the area that's directly around you. And if the water's flowing, that movement of the water will actually take some of the part that's low concentration gradient and move it away from it and move new nutrients into the place where it is. And so there's an advantage to moving around somewhat, which is if you don't have a current or you don't have any way to basically move waste products away from you and move nutrients towards you, you can move yourself, and then basically you're going to create a small wake around you, which will then basically mobilize the area of low concentration nutrients away from you and replace it with whatever's in the water, right? So there's a value to moving around a little bit for organisms that if they just stayed in place, it would probably be a disadvantage for them because they could consume all of the nutrients in their area, and then they wouldn't have any way of getting new nutrients, right? Unless water was moving or flowing. So I don't know necessarily if that's what they're doing, but I would actually argue that it could be that they're actually just trying to move around because there's an advantage to moving around. I don't know if there's a necessarily like moving versus not moving isn't usually something that's helpful if predators are in your area, because you could be moving right into the mouth of another predator. So I don't think they're trying to escape anything. But I suppose that's another thing that could be happening. That I think that some of them at least are chemotactic though, so they could also detect concentration of nutrients around them, and maybe they're moving towards areas that are higher concentration of nutrients for whatever reason. Mineralization by other organisms, or just to get the waste products that are directly around them away from them. So those would be my guesses. I mean, it's I suppose an educated guess, but that's what I would assume they're trying to get away from is their own concentration gradient that they've created by taking up all the nutrients around them. Plants don't really have that option. They get in the soil, they grow there, and then if they make a concentration gradient takes all the nutrients around the area where they are, they just try to make the roots grow a little bit farther, right? They don't really have a lot of choices. I guess they could hope for a farmer to come along or an animal to come along and add some nutrients to their environment. But if you're stuck in one place, if you're sessile, there's a disadvantage usually associated with that. Some advantages too, but some disadvantages. So, what's this little guy? It's a super small diatom. Look at this little, it's a cute one. It's a little dissolved, but I think it's just an ignathidium, but it's kind of a cool one. Look how small it is. This is 4 microns or 5 microns long. Oh, it's a Diplodocus. Ready to go. I was trying to get some of these pictures. I think this is Diplodocus marginis striata. That's my first guess anyway. Oh, that's got some crazy looking areolae on the sides of them. It's got a little track running down the middle here with little holes, and then the raphe that's running down the middle as well. It's elliptical shaped. It's pretty small for a Diplodocus, so I think it's probably marginis striata. I'm going to rotate it backwards. I want to go like 35 degrees backwards. I'm trying to get it at a 45-degree angle here. Here it is. So I can get most of it on the diagonal, which gives us a little bit more field of view room. And then I'm going to zoom in again. I just want to get the focus nice and tight. It'll get a whole lot better than that for a 7. Going to slow it down. We'll switch to speed 7, beam intensity 7, and I'll take a picture. And we'll be like 3 minutes waiting for that to happen. The spiky one looks like a solar flare beach ball. Yeah, maybe a little bit. You feel that way? Urgently going nowhere. Everybody can relate to that on some level. I'm on a hamster wheel every day, you know, like everybody else. Sometimes I step outside of the hamster wheel, but a lot of times I'm right back on the hamster wheel. So it's just the way everybody has to operate, I guess, these days. I wonder if there's anything that moves randomly or if everything involves sensory tools first before mobility. Well, that's a really interesting question. You know, like an amoeba doesn't really have like true sensory tools. It just sends its pseudopod out. I mean, I think it can feel disturbance in the area around it, but I think that, you know, they move in what sort of looks like a random fashion. And I bet people have actually looked closely at their movement patterns because they're predators, right? And they're looking for food. So there's probably some sort of strategic way of moving that actually allows you to be efficient at collecting food. And I would guess that amoeba probably figured that out. Figured it out as going to personify them a little bit, but yeah, they can feel things in their environment in a way, yeah. Let's see, there's also an option of eating birds. Oh, right. Occasionally, the plants can get their food from the surroundings if the nutrients are very poor. You can eat insects or birds. That is an option for some plants. Yeah. Islands in Indonesia and the Caribbean. It's a genus called Personia, like a prison. Interesting. I relate more to the not moving in the dark at the moment. Yeah, you have insect-eating plants in your house, yeah. Usually those live in specialized peat bogs that they only get nutrients from rainfall. And so the roots of the plants for those, like the Venus flytraps and the sundews, they don't have any nutrients around them, so their roots don't actually even get into the soil in some cases, and so they live in these specialized bogs where the surface is peat, and then they grow in the peat, and because they can't get any nutrients from the ground, they can really only get their nutrients from the rainfall, but they've adapted to like make themselves sticky or close or something so that yeah. Bog pots. Yes, peat bog pots, exactly. Reading how this tree kills birds, and it's intense. Well, it sounds super cool. We'll have to look it up. Is it Personia or Pisonia? Personia or Pisonia? Very cool. Oh, it's Pisonia, okay. Well, it sounds like they should have called it Prisonia, like a prison. That would be even more scary sounding. Just birds? Is that all it eats? Could it eat something that wasn't a bird and accidentally? Like a squirrel? Diplonese. Marginistriata. Marginistriata is correct. I can't remember which vowel. I can never figure out whether it should be an A or an I, like punctistriata, punctostriata. Anytime there's a striata, I'm like, which striata am I trying to get at? But I think that's marginistriata. Marginistriata. Ooh, there's another cool little chrysophyte. This one's got all kinds of little lines on it, little ridges. And it's got a flange around the aperture right here, which is also pretty cool. This boring one, that's a cool one. This one, spiky. Spiky, ridgy, and boring. Those are your choices. Spiky, ridgy, boring. Oh, and then we've got this one actually has a spine sticking out of it. I think that's actually the aperture. It's got like a long tube aperture sticking at the top. So not quite so boring. And then there's the one that has the actual like Gulf dimples and truly has spines sticking out in every direction. Well, in 4 directions anyway. What's this little thing? I'm just fascinated by the really tiny things today. We're just gonna keep looking at the smallest of the diatoms in the sample. Oh, that's a navicula. This, Salafra? I think it's a Salafra. I think it got moved to Salafra from, it's like Shadii, Swashmanii. I think that's what it is. One of those. I think it got moved from navicula into Salafra. It's not my fault that it's a Salafra, is what I'm saying. Ooh, look at this cool little thing. Look at all those little things that are on the outside of it. Oh. I'm taking suggestions if you want to give any to me for what the genus for this one is. I can't place it. It looks like maybe it's a Hydrophila or Hydrophila. Hydrophila? Yeah. Looks like maybe that's what it is. Let's see, I need to rotate it to like 30 or 35. Let's say 35. Get my corner. Always takes me out of the range. Here it is. It's like the tiny diatom, and it's super clean. These little specks are just granules. It's like it had a little bit of extra silica in the environment, and it stuck some on the outside of its valve so that my picture can't be as cool. I'm sure that's not why, but that's the how. So it just looks like vents. They just like one big areole, and then it has one big areole on the side, and then raphe, completely straight. You can see the little holes go all the way around on both sides, and this is the other valve down here, so we're looking at the outside. We can actually see the inside through the outside. You can see right here the edge wall on the inside of the diatom, but it's not very clear right now, so I'm hoping when I fix this focal problem, we need to okay, maybe I need to stigmate it even. A little bit. That's as sharp as we're going to get it. Also seems like our drifting problem has stopped, so that's nice. Okay, just maybe the beam needed to heat up. It's doing brightness and contrast. It looks sharp enough. I will accept it. Oh, we got rated. Physics, oh, hello. Sorry, I have rating things that's supposed to tell me when it happens, but for some reason I have my volume turned all the way down. And I can't hear anything. I think I would have thought of fixing that, but hopefully it played the little thing for you. How are you doing, Physics-O? How was your stream? And hopefully, I glanced at it before I started streaming. I saw that you were Physics Strikes Again or something was the title. And hopefully things are going well. Yeah, sometimes I'm just like lost in my SEM and I forget that people might show up and want to talk to me. We were talking just briefly about trees that eat birds. I don't know why. I guess because we were talking about how some diatoms just kind of move around, and a little bit about the why they move around. Like, you know, if you're a plant, you're kind of stuck with whatever's around you, but if you can crawl, you can make some adjustments. Sometimes they make adjustments to sort of get out of dehydration or get into light. Like, those are two primary so we were talking a little bit about that aspect. So hopefully your stream went well and you weren't annoyed that I was like, you know, looking at stuff in the SEM, because it's what we do. It's like, think of me like a musician. I'm playing an instrument, only my instrument's an SEM, and then like I can talk to people between songs. And that's basically what's going on. Yeah, I did find an interesting thing. I think it's Hydrophila. Humidiphila, sorry, that's right. Humidiphila, yeah, sorry. Yeah. I was thinking Hydrophila. I don't know why. That's the wrong group. It's because a Hygroptera was in my brain. But yes, Humidiphila was what I was thinking of. Yeah, that's where I would put it. In my head, that's where I put it anyway. You don't know which one. It looks like the SEM is still drifting a little bit because I'm up on the edge on this side, but I'm not on the edge on that side. So just like a slight drift, which is enough to annoy me because I started with it in the center. So I might want to take this picture again. Let's see, when you stack many, many images of the same cell, what would you be able to see in the stacked image that you wouldn't be able to see in a single image? Freeman, stacking images for photography of any type allows you to get things into focus. Humidophila. And typically what a stacked image is trying to do, if you're looking at something that's a space object, is like stars, would be to increase the light, because you get stars that have like a limited amount of light coming in, and so you're stacking images so that each image adds a little bit of light to the previous image. And so for stacked imagery for like space objects, you're mostly trying to increase the intensity and improve the quality of the image. Most other things that you're trying to stack when you're doing photography, you are stacking focal heights. So you take a focal height at this one, and then you move down a little bit, and you take an image at this one, and you move down a little bit, you take an image at this one. And the reason that they do that is because the closer you get to something, the shallower the depth of focus, which means a smaller amount of whatever it is in focus at the same time. In other words, if you were to hold this pencil, a long distance from your face, you could focus on the entire pencil at once. And the closer you bring it to your face, the more you can only focus on like the eraser, and the rest of the pencil is blurred. The same thing happens with basically all objects. The closer it gets to the thing that you're using to detect it, the less of it you can get into focus at once. And in cameras, we adjust this by using something called the f-stop. So you can change basically the range of focal depth with an f-stop on your camera. So your phone, for example, typically runs with this like infinite focal depth. So when something's a little bit farther away, your phone can focus on all of it at once, and it uses basically a very large f-stop. In other words, the aperture is very small, and the wider the aperture becomes, the smaller the depth of the focus becomes. And the same thing is true with your eyes. So when your eye is trying to focus on something, it makes the aperture smaller, and it tries to get the thing that's closest into focus. But in doing that, you change the properties of the way that the light is coming in, and it actually decreases the amount of the thing that you could get in focus at once. So if you were to stack an image of a pencil as it gets close to you, you could take a picture of this part, and then this focal depth, this focal depth, this focal depth, and such, so that you could then put all of those together in Photoshop or your camera. And what it will do is basically put all of that image into focus all at once. So for a diatom in a light microscope, for example, if you wanted to get the whole diatom in focus, you could stack several images. And when you do, you would change the focal height just a little bit between each picture, so that if it has spines sticking up, you could get the spines into focus, and if it has a topography, you would basically be able to capture all of the topography. The more images that you would stack, the greater the detail, right, of each one of those could be, because you could have a smaller focal depth. And this is actually the problem with like a 1000x microscope magnification, which is that there's a working distance problem. You have to be able to get close enough to the sample, which is why we don't just make lenses that are like magnification of 5,000 times, objective. We don't actually have any way of getting closer than the cover slip. The cover slip actually is thicker than the distance you would need to be if you had an objective that was like 5,000 times magnification, which is why we switch over to an SEM when it comes to something like that. So here, these two diatoms are sitting here, and but the scanning electron microscope doesn't have the same depth problems because the aperture for the scanning electron microscope, because we're looking at electrons rather than light waves, the wavelengths are much, much, much smaller, and so we don't have as much of a problem with depth of focus. And the closer I get to the sample, the less of the diatoms will be in focus, so I can actually make the sort of parts of it out of focus and parts of it in focus. But there's not really an advantage to stacking images in an SEM. Really what I would do if I wanted to do that in an SEM would be to just move out a little bit, like change the actual distance to the surface, and it would resolve most of those problems without losing a lot of the magnification power. You could also increase the accelerating voltage on the SEM, but mine's actually all the way up at 30 right now, which is the maximum for it. So hopefully that answers your question, and hopefully that was the question you were asking, because I wasn't totally sure if that's what you meant, but I just went ahead and launched into an answer anyway, because there's a lot of interesting stuff about photography and how we image things that is interesting to me as a person who does photography and also who does use microscopes and scanning electron microscopes, because there's a whole bunch of things. There's a reason why we're using a scanning electron microscope rather than a light microscope to see these things, which is that you can't get the resolution that you need, and you can't get close enough to the material. In fact, in order to look at diatoms, you have to have a special cover slip that is the number one type cover slips, or the smallest, thinnest cover slips that you can get manufactured, because they break very easily. But they're the thinnest types because you have to get so close to the actual diatoms and things to get them in focus at 1,000 times magnification that really thin glass is required. So if you just used any old cover slip and you tried to use a 1000x objective, there's a pretty good chance you wouldn't be able to get it into focus, because you have to actually get a little bit closer than the thickness of the glass at 1000x. So just a little interesting microscopy talk for you, crosstalk. This is this Hygroptera diatom again. It's nice and clean, unlike the last one that we looked at. And it's a little overexposed, which I'm going to fix here in a second. And the beam intensity is too high, which I also need to fix. But this one is a nice clean internal view of Hygroptera. I hear it beeping. Sounds like the mercury analyzer is done. There's a lab that's around the corner that runs mercury analysis. So beam intensity down to 7. And let's take a look at this. Looks sharp. All over the place sharp. Okay. Speed 7. Let's just zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to fix the brightness one more time, because now it's a little too dark. Good. Oh, a Sibeliusaurus. It's a big name. Yeah, we're using a scanning electron microscope. I guess doing a really long focal length lens system wouldn't be helpful for light imaging in biology. No. We use those for imaging microelectronics to be able to place electric probes into 100 micron square pads. Oh, cool. What's up, Shadow? Hey, David, how's it going? Welcome in, everybody. We didn't, I was busy talking and I forgot to give a shout out to, we were rated by Physics O. I should give them a little shout out. If you're not following Physics O, but you, for some reason, you like physics and you like to be educated about physics, you're not going to find much of a better place to do it than Physics O on Twitch. You should definitely give them a follow. And very accessible interaction with this chat, and a great place to just sort of hang out and learn cool things about science. We're looking at diatoms from Beauty Lake, as the title says, and this is an internal view of the diatom. This is the genus, I'm going to try to spell it correctly this time, Hygroptera. There, this is Hygroptera, and we're like looking at the one that's right there staring at us back in that picture. I think it's the same species, but I'm not totally sure because this one's a little bit narrower. But they look like they're like secretly raphid diatoms. They look like they actually belong to something else, but they have a raphy, which is this slit-like subject component right here that runs down the middle of the valve, and these ones have sort of a really short raphy where what we call the proximal ends, or the close ends to the middle, are kind of distanced from each other. It's a cute little diatom. When we looked up, its name means wet rocks. So I think that's where you find it, is on wet rocks. Thanks to Pacific Plankton for helping us with that one. Hygroptera internal. And I was hoping for an internal view of one of these, so my wish was granted, which is great. I'm going to turn up the beam intensity back to 10 so I can see. Ooh, it's a tripartita. This is like the one that I just posted the other day on Twitter. Probably you could see it if you looked at the bottom of the channel. In the part below me in the About section, there should be a picture that's like this blue and purple. Very similar to this one. This one's got junk on it, because it's always got to have junk on it when it's really cool. Otherwise, a really cool picture. Here's an internal view of that same diatom right here. So it's Lindavia tripartita. It has some central photoportula here, and let's see. Oh, that's interesting. It's got like one big deep furrow there. You can't clearly see all of the inside of it. So it's got, these are alveolar chambers around the outside edge. And if it's truly a Lindavia, we should see somewhere a Rimiportula on the valve face. I don't know if that's it, but a little labiate process that we would be able to see on the valve face somewhere. When it has clay inside of it, it makes it really hard for us to see what's going on in there. Here it is. This is the same diatom, and there is the labiate process. It looks like a little mouth, like a pair of lips. And these are central photoportula. We can zoom in on those and take a look at them, I think. I just need to change my beam intensity back. So, drop down the beam intensity. You can see the difference it makes. You can actually see they look like a tiny little hole with little tiny arrows around the outside edges. These actually are little holes as well. This one has 3 holes around one big hole. This one has 2 holes around one big hole. And then they have a little cover, a little pore cover that's this triangle-shaped thing right here. And on the outside of the holes, there's like a collar that goes around the outside. So it looks like, they make it look like like the structure is sort of T-shaped, like a rounded T surface, but it's not actually. It's actually 2 separate pieces. One of them is this piece, which is attached to the outer ring of the central hole. And then these little things on the outside that are hooked are like little collars that basically go around the outside edge of them. And then there's 3 total central photoportula, but that's not necessarily always the case. The number of those might change. And then if we look up here, this is the Rimiportula, or what some people call labiate process. So it looks like a pair of lips. So this is the labiate process, or Rimiportula. And then you can also see it has another interesting little process over here. These are the mantle photoportula. So these are central photoportula, these are mantle, or sometimes called marginal photoportula. And you can see there's the central hole, just like this one has a central hole in profile. And then these are the little slits on the outside edge. This one doesn't have slits, they actually have little tiny holes down inside of here. This one has little slits on the outside edge. There you can see it, just barely. If I sat here and played with the focus and the stigmation a little bit, I probably could get that perfectly for us so you could see it. But there's one there and there's one on this side. It's probably triangular shaped. There's probably one that's going in towards the valve. And then here's the internal chambers, the alveolar chambers. So if I show the whole thing, this is the mantle, and these things are sort of jutting in from the sides of the mantle, and they are on what are called costi, these little sort of ridges. So there's one on a costi, here's 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 one, all the way around. It'll be a little bit more obvious when I slow down the beam just a little bit. Those things that are sticking in are like little tubes. They're the same as these little tubes, except for they're on the sides. And then these are the alveolar chambers. This is a pretty clean one, and I think we probably should just go ahead and take the picture while we have it. This is an internal view. This is Lindavia tripartita. So the genus is Lindavia. Lindavia. Looks like this. And tripartita is actually the one in the top left of that 4 little panels of pictures. That's what it looks like in the light microscope. In the SEM, it has a slightly different appearance, of course, because we can see things as 3-dimensional objects. I hope if I would shrink it down so you could see the whole thing. But this is the way that it looks in the scanning electron microscope. You can see the very sort of stark difference between those 2 views. And then Lindavia as a group. Tripartita is up, they call it Raceae here, but it's like Raceae and Tripartita are basically the same thing. They've just sort of lumped them together. Rossii, which is this diatom. And one of the things about using a scanning electron microscope is that we see things in 3 dimensions. So it can have an internal and external view. The light microscope view that you see in that link is basically like looking through the diatom as if it were being x-rayed. So you're seeing all the way through the whole thing all at once. Whereas the scanning electron microscope is topographic, so we're seeing the surface and what's on the surface of the diatom. And if you look very, very carefully, you see there's a hole right here, one of these marginal or mantle photoportula, and you can see out here on the outside of the valve there's a little dark spot. Let's see, so here's the dark spot and here's the hole. So that actually connects all the way through, and if we were to trace this one through, we'd find another big hole associated with it, and if we trace this one through, we would find another big hole associated with it. So these actually pass all the way through the valve itself into the outside world. It's a way for them to, oftentimes they use them as a, they use it as a way to slow their descent sometimes, to change their rate of fall through the water column. There's a little spiky guy. Looks like a golf ball. This is a Pinularia. This one. Here's a little spiky Chrysophyte. I wish this one actually had the aperture facing us, because I want a picture of one of these with the aperture that's not covered with junk. This one's not got any junk on it, but we can't see the aperture. So, slightly problematic. As usual. Nothing's ever got everything you want in the SEM. You're always hunting for like the next, well, maybe we can find it with this thing visible. You know, sort of like, it's always a hunt, basically. But I saw something I wanted up here. Is it this thing? Oh, this is just that Star Osira that we saw earlier. I took a picture of the outside of it. Inside of it. This is the outside of it, rather. Fairly clean. It's got some junk right here, but there's nothing usually in this spot. So what's interesting is that you can see the ossolimbus up here, the little openings, and the spines are very clear. Look, a little spine broke off right there. Let's see. I decreased the beam intensity a little. I can tweak the stigmation to make that come in just a little clearer or not. To make it better, not worse. fuzzier than it was. Okay, well, let's reach some sort of peak right there. Let's do a rotation. I can hunt for it again. And just double check the focus because I did spin it. Something like this. Thank you for the follow. This is Jesvardid. You're trying to make a joke, obviously. Good one. Little dad joke. And also Don Rudo, thank you for the follow. This diatom is Staurocyra. I don't know what species. Part of the reason I'm taking a picture is because we got a nice internal view, and this is a nice external view. You're mature. That's all right. You don't need to be mature. It's like a dad joke. It's fine. Dads are mature, right? I mean, I'm a dad. Thank you. And I'm glad you like the channel. I don't always stream from the scanning electron microscope. During the weekdays, usually Wednesday afternoon, I do a little from my SEM lab, and sometimes I sneak back in on a Saturday and also do a little stuff from the SEM lab. I also do a lot of photography, some streams of the moon from my camera, which is really close to the moon usually. In terms of visually, it's the whole screen. And then sometimes the stars, sometimes birds, sometimes macro photography. I was thinking I might try to squeeze in a little macro tomorrow. It's supposed to snow, so I thought maybe I'd try to do another snowflake macro stream. We'll see how it goes. And then sometimes I just have my daughter doing some, playing Minecraft or drawing or something, which is the family side, the fun side, where I don't have a whole lot to do, but she's doing all the work because she's interested in streaming for people and doing stuff like that. So, yeah, keep an eye out. Leave the alerts on, I guess. And I'm usually not on all that frequently, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. So, but the SEM streams pretty consistently Wednesday afternoon. Next Wednesday probably won't stream. We have a departmental review, so I have to, have lunch with people and stuff. And then the following week I should be pretty active though, because it's our spring break. So this is a nice picture. Turned out pretty good. All right. This is Staurocyra SP external. Not sure which Starocera, but I know it's a Starocera. It's a question to be resolved. Perhaps an interesting mystery. Sometimes we find new species on the stream. Maybe more frequently than I would like. This one's all falling apart. That's a Oligocera. It looks super cool because it's falling apart. And you can see where it's dissolved into the next layer down. So the openings that are normally just little holes look like they have hole protectors around them. And then this is that same Lindavia we were just looking at, Rossii, Tripartita, whatever. Oh, hello. That's an interesting little Cockanies. Backwards, I want to see that one. Here. And Synopsis. It's not the Diatom I'm looking for. That is a Brachycera, also not the Diatom I'm looking for. This is a Chrysophyte, not a Diatom, but it's kind of cool looking. Oh, what a cool texture. Alright. Challenge accepted. Let's see if we can make this look good. Got little like bowling ball coconut holes in the surface, and then it's got this sort of exposed part, which is really interesting. What a weird Chrysophyte. This is not a Diatom. This is the aperture down here in the like southeast quadrant, and it's got little bumps all over the surface, right? These little spines, and then it's got like a ring of golf ball dimples around the aperture. Super weird. And then the little spines also have like a structure to them. You can see the underlying silica layer here. Such a weird little little Chrysophyte cyst. So Chrysophytes are a type of algae. They belong in the same group as Diatoms, basically, in the golden brown kind of algae group. They're single cells, and they make this thing called a stomatocyst, which is like a ball. Looks like a Christmas ornament, basically, like you're looking at right here. Sometimes they're really boring looking, and this one is the opposite of boring looking. This one's like intensely weird. Very strange surface texture. These little dimples are super weird. The aperture opening is super weird. Like everything about this guy is just a weird looking Chrysophyte cyst. Okay. Speed 7, beam 7. Focus is where it is. Pinky. Let's see. I wrote a script for my friend's Minecraft server that sends messages to his Discord server Minecraft channel when people join or leave. The messages are mostly dad jokes. Excellent. It's a pretty cool little spiky bowling ball coconut thing. This is, if you're curious, this is a Chrysophyte. C-H-R-Y, Chrysophyte. Spelled like that. I wish I could just point you to a website filled with Chrysophytes so you could see what they are, but you're just going to have to Google it, I guess, because there isn't like a Chrysophyte website like the diatoms.org webpage is the one that we use for everything here, because those people I'm friends with, and it's a great utility software website. But the Chrysophyte people probably couldn't even tell you what the organism was that made this Chrysophyte, because the Chrysophyte organism doesn't look anything like the stomatocyst. And this is a problem we often have in, like, paleontology. So I'm actually, like what I do is a subgroup of paleontology. And a typical problem is that you'd have an organism that makes a structure that doesn't look like the organism itself does, right? So this thing makes like a little casing for himself like this, climbs in it in the wintertime, it hangs out in there, and then basically it sprouts out of it in the springtime and goes back into living in the lake. So this is like a sleeping tank that it makes for itself for hibernating. And what's preserved more commonly is this. The actual organism doesn't get preserved, and so you end up with a you want your own hibernation tank? I would like to just skip 2020, please. Let's go all the way to 2025 when I wake up. Yeah, just like that. Yeah, so it doesn't look anything like the actual organism. The organism's covered with a bunch of like scales. So the scales sometimes get preserved in lake records. This is like from, 7,000 years ago. The scales sometimes get preserved, but we don't actually often see the organism that makes this. And we have no idea what the actual organism looks like if you don't catch it in the act of making the thing, right? So we're left with these objects. We don't want to give it a name, even though they can be as distinct as this one. Like, you would never mistake this for a different Chrysophyte because it's such a unique structure. It's got spikes and dimples and weird shaped openings and like everything very charismatic about it that you could expect. But we don't know what the actual organism is. So Chrysophyte scientists who work in lake systems, they either have to culture the Chrysophytes and then get them to encysst, and then look at what the encysted valve looks like, or the encysted stomatocyst looks like. Or they're just stuck with a mystery. I have this thing, I know it's a Chrysophyte, but I don't know. Yeah, exactly. It's like trying to identify a human by seeing their house and going, like, if that's all you had left, if we didn't know, or even if you had the bones of a human, but you never found them with the actual house, you'd be like, I mean, it's where it lives. I know this is a structure that humans make, but like, like you'd have a hard time identifying it. You'd be like, some sort of primate probably lived here. So it's part of the issue, though, is so the people who work with Chrysophytes have an extra layer of confusion in that the actual organism is typically not there. And so what do? They just number them. This is number 225 or something. Like, they just have a book full of numbered Christmas ornament shapes that are silica. They know they belong to a Chrysophyte. They just don't know which one, but they know that every time you have this species, it always makes that shape when it goes into encysting, when it goes into its hibernation tank. It makes one that looks like this, but they don't know which one of the organisms is it. They don't usually know. And so there are people who are trying to sort it out. A lot of times Chrysophyte cysts just look like this. So here's an example of another Chrysophyte cyst. See that? It's just like a little opening with a circle, like super hard, but it's the same kind of organism, just a different species that makes this one. And then here's another one right here. That's a Chrysophyte Cyst. Look how unique this one is, right? It looks like a horse chestnut or something. It's got a bunch of little tiny spines on it. Some different Chrysophyte makes this one, but which Chrysophyte? So they would just have a number. This would be like number 229, and that would be 223, and this one over there is 110. And when they count them or identify them, they just go, oh yeah, I know that one. It's number 65. Doesn't have a name, just a number. Because when I first started looking at Chrysophytes, I was like, ooh, these are cool. I want to learn this. And then I started to learn what they have to do, and I was like, oh no, I don't think I want to just memorize numbers. I want to give it a name of some kind, like it doesn't feel like the same if I can't figure out what genus it is, and I don't know how to interpret it. I just know it's there, right? It's like, it's a thing. I know it's a thing. I don't know what thing it is. When people say dumb things, like people in science have figured out everything they're ever going to figure out, I was like, I don't think we're anywhere near that. There are potentially 1 million undescribed diatom species left on planet Earth. There are tens of thousands of soil mites that we don't even have in genus. We don't know where they go. We have them in like the family level. We're nowhere near. We always think that we've figured everything else out. But there's a lot of mystery left in science to be had, and not just in diatoms and insects and tiny things, but even in larger organisms. There's a lot that we still a mystery, and I like that about science. I like having a part of it be like exploration. If we knew everything, and then what I'm doing is just documenting what's around, that's less interesting to me. So, what makes science sort of like fun for me is that there's this element of total exploration. I'm in a realm where like maybe nobody's ever seen this thing before. I've described species that no one has identified before, and genera that no one has identified before. So it's very likely no one's ever even seen that, right? And I might be the only person on planet Earth, until I publish about it, who's ever seen this diatom, for example. Pacific, hello! Yeah, science never ends. Hello, Mr. Fossil01. Thanks for joining in and chatting. Whose house is this? I feel like it would be difficult to do in the US unless we were just doing famous people. I guess you could still guess for non-famous people, but there's a lot of guessing. So, yeah. You're back. It's good to see you. Yeah, job security, that's a good way of looking at it too. There's still a lot for us to learn, so. How was your taxi driving, Pacific? Nobody shot you in your car while you were trying to get from one location to another, I hope. I feel like you probably shouldn't be stopping to send us messages if that's the case. Oh, it was a long drive. It's unfortunate. You're all safe, though. Well, that's good. Hey, are you going to stream this week? Because I stayed up last night and I was thinking, isn't Pacific supposed to stream on Wednesday nights? And you never appeared. So it's not that I was staying up just to see your stream. I was just up already, and I thought, isn't she going to show up on a Wednesday? You had a meeting. Okay. Are you going to stream this week, though? That's the question I had. I still have. Is that going to happen? Can you tell us? Do you know? I should push this button that says pack right here, like that. You should give Pacific Plankton a follow. Oh, you were maybe going to stream now-ish? Oh. Oh, you're setting up. Very nice. Well, maybe I will raid you now-ish, because I'm getting ready to end. And then I can hand off my group of curious fellow Twitch viewers who love science and especially like things in microscopes to another person with microscope who might entertain them, you know, for an hour or two, as we do. I don't know what this diatom is. Let me look. I really don't even have a clue where to start with this thing. I don't know what this is or where it goes. Maybe Cockneys. I'm gonna put like Cockneys, maybe. I don't know what that is. I don't have any idea. But this one, I think it's a Slophera. A little tiny Slophera shoddy eye or whatever that thing is. It's a cool looking diatom. It's probably Cockneys. There's some more weird. We saw a really weird. There's another really weird little Chrysophyte right there. This one's got golf ball dimples all over it. It's a little dissolved. And the same thing. Maybe a Cockneys? I don't know. Alright, let's zoom out. I'm going to jump over to stub 1, which I haven't spent any time on. Slightly different stub. Same material. Same sample. More or less the same diatoms. Just a different aliquot of the original material. That's a science way of saying a little bit of an aliquot, a piece of, a fraction of the original sample. We refer to as an aliquot. I think only scientists use that phrase, so. Not sure what that lump of junk is. There's a Cerarella. We're zoomed kind of far out because I was thinking maybe I would find another large piece of ash to image. Volcanic ash, I mean. There's some pieces in here. These are all volcanic ash. I've got those little streaky lines going through them. That's a sort of characteristic of ash. These ash are silt size in terms of like grain size, so smaller than sand grains basically, but in that realm. This looks like, oh, it is. This is Didymosphenia, and this is Beauty Lake. We published a paper on the fact that Didymosphenia, which is this diatom, is present in this lake 8,000 years ago. And here it is from around 7,000 years ago, so not surprising, it's still there. And it's in the lake today. People thought that this might have been an invasive species in North America, and I was like, sorry, I have this thing in an ancient lake deposit from thousands of years ago. And then my colleagues were like, are you sure? And I was like, I have some samples. And the next thing you know, we wrote a paper about it. Well, it did take about 10 years to get the paper finally written, but we did write it. Look, it's the little pufferfish looking guy. That's a Chrysophyte, not a Diatom. There's the aperture, but there's junk, and I can't even get the whole picture of this thing. Would be okay though. It'd be an okay shot. There's another one that's a different Chrysophyte that's bigger. Slightly dissolved. Sorry, let me zoom back out and see if I can find another Didymosphenia, but that is cool. That one's actually covered with a bunch of junk, of course, but you can see the shape is like a bowling pin. That one's a broken bowling pin though. And I could pick it out from outer space up here pretty easily. Noticed any of those before in these samples, so that's also very cool to finally see one here. I wish it was a whole one, and I wish it wasn't covered with any junk so that we could get a nice picture of it, but as it is, that's fine. At least we saw it, and I got to talk about it a little, so it's a big something or other. What's that? Girdle view of something, maybe. Oh, this is a Diatom. It's Confinema acuminatum. It's got junk in it, but it's a cool Diatom. If it sounds like I just spout out a bunch of gibberish, it's because I'm casting spells, and if you're hearing it, that's the attack part of Diatom's attack. This is the Diatoms. The attack part's where I say all the names, and I'm using Latin, so I'm obviously casting a spell. That's the way that Harry Potter does it. Actually, all magicians, when they cast spells, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but it's Latin. And also all the names of Diatoms are Latin, therefore they are spells. So just saying, if you say it right, things could happen. That's how magic works. Well, let's find something to get a nice image of. And then maybe our good friend Pacific Plankton will have started her stream. And then we could raid her. Does that sound nice? I think that's a happy little end for the day. I streamed longer than I had planned. Look at this guy. Look at these cool little whorls it has around it. These are crazy fins. That's a Chrysophyte. Look at this, like, bladed fin things going around in every direction. What's this? I'm not sure what that is. I think it's a broken Chrysophyte. I think we're looking at the inside of a Chrysophyte right there. Look like a Diatom. That's a piece of pine pollen, by the way. Spiky ball. Other not so spiky ball. Spiky ball. See all of them? They're all over in here. I saw... That's also a Chrysophyte. This one's dissolved. And another one. I thought I saw one up here. Another Chrysophyte Cyst that looked good. Nupella. That's a diatom, Nupella. Not one that we see very frequently, but it's all over in these samples. That could be said by a lot of these things. So the one that I've been looking for today, we actually just saw only one of them so far, which is the Volcella, or Volcella ficus, and it was broken, covered with some junk. What's this guy? Hello? It's a diatom, just dissolved. Thought maybe we could find a cool Chrysophyte. They're all covered with junk, unfortunately. Leucocyra. We can see the overlapping spines on this one pretty nicely. Okay. Now it's in focus. And check the beam intensity. Take a picture, and then let's check and see if Pacific is on yet. I didn't put the sand dollar on yet because I didn't think you were going to be able to make it today, so I thought maybe you'd want to be there. That's going to be my plan for maybe Saturday. Doesn't have you have started yet, Pacific. This looks good though. In focus. Looking sharp. Speed 7, beam 7, let's go. I'm going to scroll back and see what people were saying too. Is the junk non-organic minerals and sand, or is it part of other diatoms? Yes to both of those. Stop chatting and hurry up. Yes. Hello, Panfryer. We're getting a little extra microscope time in today, yes. Is it alive? Everything that we're looking at is fossils of things that used to be living. They are about 7,000 years old. Somebody nuded at me. The skeletons of algae that are microscopic. Yeah. It's a scanning electron microscope. What it does is fires an electron beam down onto the sample, and then the electron beam interacts with whatever's down there. It knocks some of the electrons out of whatever it is, and then because electrons have a negative charge, it has a little doodad that has a positive charge, and all the electrons go flying towards it. And the more electrons that fly towards it, the brighter that pixel is, basically. And so what it's doing is building the image basically pixel by pixel. It's saying that's a bright one, that's a dark one, that's medium, that's a dark one, that one's a bright one. It scans across super fast, right? But it's just little 1 pixels at a time. So it's actually building the image as we're watching it, which means if I were to like smash the container with my hand and knock my sample around, these lines down here would be like disturbed, right? So it's actually building the image as it goes. It's not downloading it. It's not like it took a picture and it's just downloading. It's actually like scanning over the surface. That's the scanning part. It's using an electron beam. That's the electron part. And it makes it look really big. That's the microscope part. Scanning electron microscope. Yeah. So, is everybody in Latin America wizard? Possibly. But I don't think they speak Latin. So, if a cook casts spells with delicious bacon, do they do so in Pig Latin? Yes, absolutely. Hey, Dr. Derp, how's it going? We're talking about spell casting in Latin. The types of diatoms you find differ from when they are collected throughout the year. Yes, there's a seasonality to diatoms, absolutely. And what's living in the water column can be different from season to season. If you're looking at a river system, they would change as you go progressively through the year. So there's a seasonality to rivers, there's a seasonality in the ocean, there's a seasonality in lake systems where what blooms right when the ice comes off of a lake versus the middle of summer are usually totally different. Yeah. Studio's back. Hello. This is 2 sister cells of the genus Olicocyra. That's this one. Olicocyra. Careful, I don't want to cast a spell at you. It's this one. Olicocyra. And the spines that you see, they have like a spatulate-like ending. And if you take your fingers and you do this with them, and then you like bend your knuckles, right? Your knuckles are sort of the wide part of that spine. And so the spine's doing this. It's basically using its knuckles on the spines to hold the 2 valve faces close together. These are what we call sibling cells, or sister cells, is the way I usually refer to them, as they're sisters. And the spines have been holding them together in place. They form colonies, long colonies usually. I think this one only has 2 in it, but oftentimes long colonies. And so like they're holding hands with their sister, and this one's been holding hands with its sister for 8,000 years. They died holding hands together, and they're still holding hands through the sediment. It's been dunked in nitric acid. It's been dissolved through time. It's been processed with hydrogen peroxide to burn out all the organic matter that was left in the sample. It's been shaken on a ultrasonic water bath. It's been dried and placed in a vacuum and then coated with gold and stuck in another vacuum and then attacked with electron beams. And these 2 sisters are still holding hands. Isn't that a cool little love story? They're sisters forever, holding hands. That's my best Bob Ross for you, right there. Okay. It builds the image in what takes, if I change, so for a scanning electron microscope, for that question, let me answer that. I was trying to be poetic for a bit here, but let me answer that question, which is that I can change the speed that the scanner scans, the electron scans over the surface. So right now the speed is 7, and I can make it 8, you'll see it slow down. I can make it 9, you'll see it slow down even further. If I put it on 10, it takes an hour and a half to take a single picture. So see how little this little bar is moving? This little bar is the beam moving. It's moving very, very slowly. So the picture has very high resolution, but we have to wait an hour and a half for it to finish this image. I don't have an hour and a half to just watch a diatom picture develop. So speed 9 looks like this. It's a little bit faster, still slow. Speed 8 looks like this. Speed 7 looks like this. This is the speed that we took the picture at. So the beam is moving pretty quickly. It takes about 3 minutes to take this picture. Speed 6 takes about 1 minute to take a picture. And then speed 4, which is where we usually are moving around the slide, you can see how long it takes to scan the image. It just takes a second or two. But look what happens to the image. As I speed it up, it starts to function more like a TV in that the image, if I move the stage around, the image responds quickly, but the resolution gets worse and worse. So this is speed 1. This is the fastest speed that our microscope has, and look how quickly it responds to me moving, right? It can redraw it. It's just like an old-fashioned TV. And if I slow the beam down to 3, you can still see it move, but see how long it takes to redraw the picture. So with the scanning electron microscope, the operator, that's me, has to figure out some balance between, am I moving? What do I need to see? Is it, like something that I need to have really high resolution? And then I have to make decisions about like how close we should be, how far we should be from the subject matter as well. But those are like the part that I have to manage. Okay, so, but yes, the beam actually can scan fairly quickly, right? If you set it that way. Just don't get a very clean image as a result. If these are all fossils of diatoms, what would a fresh diatom look like? So, living diatoms, we will see, because we're going to go take a look at Pacific plankton stream, and she will have some living diatoms in it, I'm quite sure. Until I said Duncan acid. You don't like that part? But they have chloroplasts in them. And in the scanning electron microscope, there's a problem, which is basically all the organic matter ends up basically being on the surface. And because what we're doing is topographic, all of the surface is covered with the organic matter. So I try to get rid of that part. That's why we don't get in the acid. So, all right, I think Pacific has got set up because I saw her for a second there streaming. So we will give her a raid. Pacific Plankton. And I hope everybody had fun hanging out with me today. I was looking around in some samples, taking some cool pictures, looking at some diatoms on the scanning electron microscope. We looked at some chrysophytes, some fossil stuff, you name it. We hung out and did it for a while. We talked about birds that get eaten by trees. We talked about what decisions do diatoms have to make and why do they crawl around. I feel like we just hit all kinds of fun topics. Chippy Flip, thank you for hanging out with us. Another shout out for our friend Chippy Flip. If you like space photography, you should give Chippy Flip a follow. He does astrophotography with a telescope, not with a camera like me. And Myco Learning is also still here, I think. You should give Myco Learning if you're interested in mushrooms. She does some microscopy as well and looks at identifying mushrooms. All right. Yeah. Hey, Myco. We're going to go next to visit my friend Pacific Plankton, and she's going to be streaming from microscopes in her super good lab space in San Francisco, and probably she'll have us looking at some stuff from San Francisco Bay. So have a good day. Hopefully I'll catch you later in the week sometime.
Thank you very much for waiting. I didn't know the people were around. How was your stream? I'm so sorry I missed a big chunk of it. Yeah, this does look snazzy, doesn't it? It isn't. It's not the same old science sport. This is a super good space that I'm streaming in. Claw machines. You Dr. Jerk. I know, Grace, right? Like, I'm here. I'm actually here. And I suppose I can make this bigger. I'm trying to figure out why. You know, it's the troubleshooting thing. I know, right? I was just telling Studio Cornex that I am going to collect. Here we go. Make this bigger, but I still have to figure out why the microscope image is coming from a projector, which is lovely. Projector, which is lovely, but it's not coming through here, and I'm not sure why. So, yeah, science sport. Look at it. It's mega structure. It is compared to the